So if comic shops were to go away, or if we continue to live in this world where people don't really want to talk to each other, we wear masks, it's an uncomfortable, awkward situation for people to have that kind of camaraderie. What does that mean for discussion in the comic shops? Because marketing is largely very poor in comic books in general, a lot of the new recommendations and the ways people find comics is through word of mouth, or at least from one person telling another person. So, what replaces that? If we truly get into a lot of problems here, what replaces this aspect of community? Hey, everybody, this is Perch. I think that one of those areas where comic books has suffered a lot lately is that we haven't built up the necessary replacements for community recommendations for fans to kind of hear from other fans what they like, what they should read, what they're missing out on. And I think it's really evident from the fact that you do have some YouTube channels, some comic book channels like this one, I guess, although I don't do it so much, that a lot of people really depend on for the recommendation. You hear it over and over and over, people saying, I go to YouTube channels to kind of, get suggestions on which books to read. And the challenge that we have here is that that's really not sufficient in any kind of significant way. It's good, don't get me wrong. I'm glad it exists. It's one of those, this is literally better than nothing. But what else can kind of take the place of recommendations? I mean, so let's take a look at what we've got. First of all, I think, and most positive in many cases when it's functioning, is inside the comic store itself. I Over and over and over, we've had people who come in, are buying comics, and they get a recommendation to buy another comic, either from somebody who works in the shop or another fan who's standing there talking them up. Many new series have been discovered that way. Now, granted, there's one flaw in this, and that is it's not bringing new people in, meaning if you're not currently collecting comics, you're obviously not in the comic shop in the first place. And so it's not bringing those new people in, and that's something that has to be addressed. But in terms of just, comic books, comic book fans learning about other things, this is a major place. Do you know the amount of customers that have been turned on to something like Preacher or Saga or, yeah, The Walking Dead, for that matter, before it was a TV show and before it became popular, a lot of that stuff came from comic fans in the comic shop telling other comic fans, and it's hurting now with comic shops closed or with COVID and all the rest of that stuff. It's just those recommendations are not as straightforward; they're not as easy to obtain, and we're kind of discouraging just idle conversation in general. And I don't see it that's coming back quickly anytime soon. A lot of shops are going to adopt to this kind of new normal of get people in, get people out, and go for kind of acceleration and convenience that way. And when things open back up again, it's not like the world is just going to naturally slow down. When people are sped up, they tend to stick that way. This was one of the worries that Starbucks had when it introduced mobile ordering for coffee. I remember there were people within that shop, that group, who were saying, "Well, this is going to take away from a lot of people who just kind of come into Starbucks and have conversation and chat." And one, that didn't really happen. People still go to Starbucks to hang out. Not so much anymore. But two, once that mobile feature is rolled out, it is the new norm. It's not like you could take that away. So many people, if they now had to go back and wait in line, it would be incredibly obnoxious. Most people are trying to figure out how to get that Starbucks-like behavior to happen other places. Like, imagine that in a comic shop where you go onto the shop's mobile app, you order all the comics that way, and you just go in and pick it up in a bag. That would be a terrible experience, I think. But there's definitely some people out there who would love it. Outside of the shop, you have, that's where it starts to fall apart. There is no real place for kind of community conversation from the publishers themselves. And I think here's an area where a smaller publisher, like a Vault or a Boom or a Dark Horse or an IDW or somebody, should consider what would it be like if they created their own message boards. Take a page from Warren Ellis. No, not the romance, the ladies part, but the message boards. John Byrne and his boards. Why not? Why doesn't the publisher encourage this kind of conversation? Well, there's one obvious answer. They don't want the headache of having to keep it up, to moderate it, to get in feuds with other people and everything else. And make no mistake about it, that's a big pain and it's a drain. Uh, no doubt, it's a full time position in a lot of cases if you become popular. But outside of that, sorry, that's me honking. If you could hear in the background, the guy in front of me, for every light, he comes to the light. I don't know if he's working his phone. I mean, I'm managing to do a show for my channel and still driving like a normal person. But every light guy comes to, the light turns green. Everybody else proceeds. The guy in front of me just sits there. And this is like light number 4. And finally, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to honk at this guy to prompt him along because he's clearly not paying attention to anything. See, we're coming up to a red light right now, and we're stopping. What's going to happen? Take your bets. Report in a moment. Anyway, the point is that if you're a small indie company, you could have a pretty active message board. You could start to curate this community. Guy did it again. Not move it. Jesus. Anyway, you could curate this community, I think, really easy, have it be positive, but it would be a headache. It would be something you'd have to update. But if you could get your arms around it, you'd have something that the big two and really nobody else has. And the reality is, any company that's owned by AT&T or Disney is not going to want to get involved in this. They're going to leave it to third parties to do. So, okay, so now let's go to the third parties. Now you got places like Facebook, you have Twitter, you have YouTube channels, you have you have folks like that. And that's where it's the Wild West. And increasingly, what people in comic books are more interested in doing is not recommending things to other people, but instead shouting about what they're either missing or what they don't like. What's interesting to me is this, and I don't want to go off on a complete tangent here, but there are comics that get canceled, like the Unstoppable Wasp, the one I like to pick on. Anyway, Future Foundation. There's these books that tend to not get any audience. The World of Wakanda book that was canceled almost immediately, and people were really angry about that. Or maybe the series has been going for a little while, like the Hawkeye book by Kelly Thompson, or America Chavez, that book. And people get really angry when they get canceled, like, oh, they're canceling there's these almost tearful comments about, this was a book that inspired a new generation and now it's gone. And what I wonder about is those people who are writing these very eloquent soliloquies about the book that has now been canceled. Like, where were they when the book was happening? Like, when America Chavez was actually going on, it was pretty much radio silence. Nobody was talking about that book, or very few. You have a couple Stan accounts that would do things from time to time, but really nothing of any significance. And when you go to things like the Hawkeye book, the Kate book by Kelly Thompson, you'd have people who'd praise that book, but usually that was Kelly herself or friends of Kelly, and they'd be like, "Oh my God, I love this character," and they'd be kind of all over this fawning praise, but you didn't hear any kind of real organic, comments from fans. You would hear stuff from within the industry, and that stuff really has mixed to zero value in terms of a recommendation or something where a comic fan is really going to get excited about it and pick it up. Nobody trusts those things. So what's replacing any of this? Finally, sorry, there's one more location, and that is the news sites. Now, the news sites are interesting because the news sites are usually comped comic books in order to review them. And the reason why that comping happens is so, somebody can give a review, some people could check it out, learn about the book, start to talk about it, lead to some sales. That's the entire point of it. But the problem is a lot of these reviews are read by, close to nobody. And the reviews in general are complete amateur hour in how they're put together. There's rarely a point of view. It's usually just praise because the reviewer is scared to say something negative about the book because they got it for free. So if they say something negative, they might not get that next issue for free. And so it becomes like very positive, either over the top or just unauthentic. It doesn't feel like the review doesn't feel like anything any human being wrote. It doesn't come from the heart. And so as a review, nobody trusts it. Nobody's like coming in going, I'm all over this book. Yeah, tell me more. Nobody's saying that. It's just it's just like kind of a review vomited out the other end. It doesn't feel substantial. Now, there are exceptions. I'm guarantee you, if you're listening to this right now, you'll say, I listen to this YouTube channel or Hey, I've been recommended lots of books by your boy Zach, and so therefore, that works. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm saying it's the exception, not the rule. This isn't become a cohesive community. And when I say the word community, what I mean by that is a place where people can share ideas, people can share recommendations, where you can discover new books, all these kinds of smaller elements that really matter to grow the comic business. Instead, these things are going away. And I'm not saying the world was great and strong when comic books shops were open, but it doesn't help that that's one more avenue that's kind of closing down or stopping. So what's there to replace it? Again, the obvious answer is something online, something like channels or message boards or other things. But it's very ad hoc. It's often driven by a love of fans. The thing that would be most devastating to Marvel and DC. I see a lot of people talking about, I hate those guys. They've gone wrong. I'm just happy. I want to burn it all down. What would burn it down faster than anything else? Not talking about it. Even if you're pissed and you're raging about them every single day, even if you're posting 50 tweets a day about how broken and woke and all the rest of the stuff Marvel or DC are, some people agree with you, and you'll get some cheers, you get some crowd, but some people will disagree, and the people who disagree are becoming engaged to that brand. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to go out and buy anything there, but they're engaged. They're talking about it. They're getting it's at least known. The silence is the biggest killer of all. Imagine like if nobody was talking about Marvel or DC, positive or negative, just silence, because there's not a lot of positive. There's not a lot of real positive stuff. Again, it's kind of misleading because if you go on social media and you look at the posts that are really promoting books and really positive, like, oh man, this is so cool, it's great. There tends to be very little of it, and what little there is, is either coming from within the creator community themselves, meaning it's creators praising other creators, or it is just some kind of unknown account, or it's like the Poison Ivy Stan Club number 12, and the creators are retweeting this stuff aggressively, and that's how it's showing up on your timeline. Is the creators are doing it. There's not a lot of huge buzz out there for comics, period, from anybody. And so if all the negative comments went away, like Marvel, DC, they'd be a ghost town. Like they'd be tumbleweeds on this brand, and that just complete silence is worse in a lot of cases than anger, because anger at least shows some engagement. You at least get somebody who just wants to disagree with whatever the anger is and have a fight, and that may lead to sales. It will at least lead to some brand recognition, the brand being remembered. But what we commonly have is just nothing. Just silent. If you had silence, that's the worst. And that's where I'm afraid comics is headed, because right now it's kind of popular and it's entertaining for people to come in here and have this brawl. But I'm noticing even online, like the big angry brawlers are increasingly just disengaging. They're just walking away from comics entirely, or it's very half-hearted. Like the outrage is just it doesn't have the same heat to it. And of course it doesn't, because if you stay angry for too long, it's not going to sustain. But when people just go quiet, what happens then? I don't think anything good. But anyway, this is my point. Sorry, I went all over the place a little bit. Guy continued to be annoying on the road. But what do you think? What is the place we can go to where you can actually get fans recommending series to other fans, where you can get this kind of organic promotion and spread? I didn't really touch on this video, but how do you then start to bring in people from outside current comics in to start looking at this stuff and thinking about it and want to participate? And then, is silence the worst thing of all? Do you disagree? Leave a comment below. Love to hear your thoughts. Hey, like and subscribe. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel. It's a place for us to talk about comics. We're not in a shop together, but if we were, I'd be probably something like this. Why not? Follow me on social media if you choose to, or shoot me an email. I'm at comics, Perch with an S, @gmail.com. And thanks for listening.